This is Felt Recoil.
Welcome to the Felt Recoil podcast. This week, we will wrap up our reading of Newsweek's story on the Operation Anaconda controversy. First, I want to remind you that our charity of choice this week remains Special Operations Warrior Foundation. You can find more info on them at specialops.org. Special Operations Warrior Foundation pledges to ensure full college funding to every surviving child of a special operator who loses their life in the line of duty. They proactively reach out to every eligible family. Families do not have to apply for the help that Special Operations Warrior Foundation provides. But specialops.org does need your help. So you can go there and see how you can support them as they support the families of our heroes at specialops.org. Lots of positive responses to last week's episode, which is bittersweet. It's a terribly sad story, but it's nice to hear that you enjoy it. So if you have another story you enjoy equally or greater than, and this is something you want to hear more of, just submit your story. Send it to me, Chris, K-R-I-S, at feltrecoilshow.com. I enjoy fully producing these episodes with the effects and the music. I find that to be enjoyable. So I'm happy to put more together, and if I can get enough in the can, I'll be glad to do a whole series of them. So let me know what you've got, and I'll be glad to read it and put it together. Chris, K-R-I-S, at feltrecoilshow.com. And now here's the rest of the story. Mako 3-0 Charlie. The video presentation wasn't the only evidence the Air Force used to buttress its case for Chapman. It also obtained a sworn statement from someone never previously interviewed in connection with Takur Ghar. Jay, Chapman's counterpart on one of the Delta Force teams which occupied an observation post roughly 3 miles north of Takur Ghar. Jay was from Chapman's unit and knew his radio style. In September 2016, in an affidavit obtained by Newsweek, he told an Air Force lawyer that he repeatedly heard Chapman's voice and call sign, Mako 3-0 Charlie, on the radio during the period when the video shows him fighting for his life.
Mako 3-0 Charlie. Mako 3-0 Charlie.
Jay says, in comments never previously made public, quote, "The voice on the radio was John Chapman." A Mako 30 SEAL claims the Navy investigated Jay's assertions and concluded they were inaccurate, saying, quote, "That was all disproved by comms logs and who was there. When it was dug into, it was not factual." And he adds, quote, "We were on all the same freaks," meaning radio frequencies, "and we never heard that," end quote. The former combat controller disputes this assertion, saying, quote, "They weren't on the same freaks. That's a smokescreen. He's towing the party line." The SEALs would have been on an inter-team frequency on their handheld radios, whereas Jay would have been on battlefield common frequency. The former combat controller adds that there were no logs in which Chapman's calls would have been recorded because the frequency he was calling on would not have reached any of the command posts where those logs were kept. In addition to the video and Jay's witness statement, Chapman's autopsy, which the Air Force reanalyzed as part of its investigation, also supported the case that he had fought for a sustained period on the peak. Says the former combat controller, quote, "The man was shot and fragged 16 times, to include contusions on his face, nose, neck, and hands. That didn't happen in the first 2 minutes," end quote. Chapman's autopsy states that all the airman's wounds occurred before his death. The bruises to Chapman's hands, neck, and face were likely the result, according to the combat controller, of hand-to-hand combat with the two militants who made it as far as the bunker before Chapman killed them. A final piece of evidence supporting the Air Force's case? According to two sources familiar with the details of Chapman's award package, when he and his gear were recovered, he was found to have fired all his usable ammunition before succumbing to his wounds. Chapman had emptied 6 30-round magazines, far more than he would have during the 2 minutes or less that elapsed before Slabinski saw him fall. The blame game. In January 2016, Defense Secretary Ash Carter directed the military to conduct a review of service crosses and silver stars from the post 9/11 conflicts to see if any warranted an upgrade. The Air Force's attempt to boost Chapman's award became part of the review. Army Major Dave Eastburn, a Pentagon spokesman, says that in his directive, Carter waived the requirement that new, substantive, and relevant material information be provided to justify an upgrade. However, Air Force officials and others close to the Chapman upgrade effort were seemingly unaware that he did so. The Air Force divided its conclusions about Chapman's exploits into his actions from the moment Mako 30 landed back on Takur Ghar to when the SEALs retreated, and then the events on the peak after the SEALs had withdrawn. For Air Force Secretary James, it was the latter, and particularly the video evidence that convinced her that Chapman deserved the Medal of Honor. She told Newsweek, "That was all I needed. That was like forensic proof in a crime scene almost." She forwarded her recommendation to Carter's office, confident that the Air Force's case was ironclad, saying, quote, "I thought it was going to be a slam dunk, easy to get through package." On August 27, 2016, the New York Times published a story, co-authored by the author of this story, about the Air Force's effort to get Chapman a Medal of Honor. The article said that the Air Force's findings could rekindle old tensions in the special operations community over the mission. And to James's surprise and alarm, it did. She says, quote, "People were afraid of getting blamed for the fact that the mission didn't go well. And then on top of that, it's a god-awful thing to believe now that you left someone behind for dead who, in fact, was alive. There's a lot of guilt going on here. And there's also the reputation of the SEALs at stake." End quote. Within a few days of the story's publication, a gathering of senior military leaders gave James the chance to speak with Army General Tony Thomas, the head of U.S. Special Operations Command. He had been the 1st Ranger Battalion commander in Afghanistan at the time of the battle. The 3 Rangers who died were his men, something no one had told her. James says she asked Thomas if she could count on his support regarding her recommendation to upgrade Chapman's award. He assured her his headquarters was, quote, "absolutely behind the recommendation," she says. A military official who has discussed this issue with Thomas says that according to the general, no such conversation took place. James says she walked away from the conversation with renewed confidence that the upgrade would proceed smoothly. Events soon changed her mind. It was very hurtful. From the beginning of its effort to get Chapman's award upgraded, the Air Force appears to have taken extraordinary care not to impugn Slabinsky or the SEALs. Air Force officials knew they had much to lose from picking a fight with such a politically influential group, so they tiptoed around the notion that members of the SEALs' most elite outfit had inadvertently abandoned a teammate in the middle of a firefight. James says, quote, "Nobody was accusing Slabinsky or any of the other members of the team of having done anything other than their very best under these terrible circumstances." In his voiceover for the Air Force's video presentation, the narrator describes Slabinsky's decision to retreat from the mountaintop in positive terms, saying, quote, "This bold action likely averted a catastrophic loss of the entire team. The team leader's intent was to suppress the enemy with air power. The team hoped to eliminate the threat, locate Petty Officer Roberts, recover Sergeant Chapman's body, and fulfill their commitment to leave no man behind. Once again, the enemy and the environment thwarted the team's plan." Nonetheless, by late 2016, it was becoming clear that the SEALs were going to resist the Air Force's attempt to upgrade Chapman's award based on his actions after the SEALs retreated from the mountaintop. Says a former Air Force official, they didn't want to be seen as having left Tech Sergeant Chapman behind. It was very hurtful and very problematic for them on many levels. A former Air Force official says the SEALs began throwing up bureaucratic roadblocks in an attempt to delay or defeat the effort to upgrade Chapman's Air Force Cross. Gabe Camarillo, the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Manpower and Reserve Affairs from January 2016 to 2017, says, quote, "There was a tremendous push by the Air Force to get this done by the end of the Obama administration." If President Obama left office without awarding Chapman the medal, Camarillo says there wasn't any confidence that this wouldn't die on the vine. Air Force officials held meeting after meeting with each other and with their counterparts in the Office of the Secretary of Defense throughout 2016, breaking through one logjam after another. But just as it seemed Chapman's package had a chance of getting to the White House in time, Pentagon bureaucrats intervened. Staff in the Office of Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Peter Levine, noticed that the SEALs had never signed their original witness statements for Chapman's Air Force Cross. Those statements were part of the upgrade package. Levine and his staff were keen to get them signed, particularly because the Chapman case was otherwise unprecedented in its reliance on technical intelligence rather than eyewitnesses. James says, "The appropriate people contacted these individuals and asked them to sign their words 15 years ago. But after a couple of months of waiting for the SEALs, they refused," she claims. Camarillo, the former Air Force Assistant Secretary for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, confirms this account. That's when things broke down, and the SEALs realized that, we can take a stand and maybe thwart this thing, according to a former combat controller. One Mako 30 SEAL says that he was not aware of this development and that he had never been asked for such a statement after the battle, let alone refused to sign one. Newsweek verified the existence of statements from 3 of his teammates and attempted to reach out to them, but was unable to speak to them. For Air Force officials, the SEALs' alleged refusal to sign their witness statements represented a turning point. James says, "I guess that's when it really clicked in my mind. Yep, there's something more going on here, and what a shame." In frustration, Air Force officials explained what was happening to Levine's staff, who finally allowed the package to proceed without the signatures. But valuable time had been lost. SEAL Team 6 and Naval Special Warfare Command each opposed the Air Force's effort to upgrade Chapman's award based on the events after the SEALs retreated, according to multiple sources. Rear Admiral Tim Zymanski, who, as head of Naval Special Warfare Command oversees all SEAL units, was in the thick of the debate. A Navy officer familiar with the awards controversy says, quote, "The biggest advocate for Slabinski was Zymanski." But Zymanski had a personal stake in how the Tucker Gar story was told. He had been Team 6's Director of Operations during Anaconda, helping run Mako 30's mission from Bagram. Slabinski has told others that when he arrived back at Bagram, bruised and exhausted from the ordeal, Zymanski was the only person to hug him and tell him he'd done a good job. Since that moment, a close bond developed between the two, says a former senior Team 6 officer who knows both men. Saying, quote, "Ski was always very confident in Slab, and he was always very proud of him. You could tell it was a good relationship." The former senior Team 6 officer says the way Zymanski saw it, the Air Force was trying to come against the Navy and kind of shame Slab. His point was, that dude, Slabinski, did everything humanly possible. Not on your life are you going to try to get Chappie an award, which hurts Slab. And so I think he ended up doubling down to help Slab, because if Chappie gets it, the unspoken word is, well, who left him behind? But Zymanski's fierce defense of Slabinski required the SEAL Admiral to oppose any public acknowledgement of what the Air Force, in its study of the incident, called Material Finding 2, which said that Chapman fought on after the SEALs left him behind. The Navy officer familiar with the controversy says, "I just don't know how you advocate for Slabinski and be accepting of finding two. Indeed, throughout 2016, the SEALs tried to persuade the Air Force and then Carter's office to justify Chapman's upgrade solely on the basis of his actions before the SEALs left the mountain. According to former Air Force officials, by December 2016, with the package finally on Carter's desk, the SEALs' argument was apparently gaining traction at U.S. Special Operations Command, which doesn't make the final decision, but is allowed input. That month, says a former senior Air Force official, Thomas, the head of U.S. Special Operations Command, told General David Goldfein, the Air Force Chief of Staff, that he had changed his mind about giving Chapman's upgrade package his full support. According to two former Air Force officials, Thomas said he was more than willing to support an upgrade based on Chapman's actions up to the moment the SEALs retreated, but he wanted the Air Force to drop the second part of Chapman's citation, which summarized his actions after the SEALs withdrew. Navy Captain Jason Salata, a spokesman for U.S. Special Operations Command, referred all questions about his command's role in the Medal of Honor process to the Office of the Secretary of Defense. To James's disappointment, the former senior Air Force official says Goldfein told her he had granted Thomas's request, worried that doing otherwise would mire the upgrade effort in months of debate. The Air Force was running out of time with the Obama administration, and Goldfein thought acceding to Thomas gave the service a better chance of securing Chapman's upgrade. Through a spokesperson, Goldfein declined to comment for this story. James was upset at the way Thomas had circumvented her, but there was little she could do, the former senior Air Force official says. A few weeks before Trump's inauguration, the Defense Secretary signed Chapman's upgrade package. James pleaded with the White House to fast-track the process. But it was too late. Getting it through the National Security Council and onto the president's desk, as well as the logistical challenge of arranging the multiple ceremonies that are standard when the commander-in-chief presents the nation's highest award for valor, required more time. As the Trump administration took office, the Chapman package returned to the Pentagon for another review. James says it got bounced back and blames the SEALs' alleged stalling tactics for the failure to get the award approved in time. 100%, she says, it caused that delay. As a political appointee, James left the Pentagon at the end of the Obama administration. As she departed, she called Chapman's mother to tell her that her son's package had been returned to the Pentagon. James chokes up at the memory of the conversation. She recalls, quote, "But I thought to myself, well, surely, under General Mattis, it'll go back quickly." Yet again, her optimism was misplaced. Beyond the call of duty. Shortly before Trump's inauguration, the Navy surprised close observers of the Chapman upgrade saga. As part of the awards review directed by Carter, the service recommended that Slabinski's Navy Cross also be upgraded to a Medal of Honor. A Mako 30 SEAL says that he first heard confirmation of the Navy's intent in mid-January 2017, but he had surmised it from rumors some months earlier. From what he heard from other SEALs later, it seemed the Navy viewed this as a quid pro quo for Chapman's upgrade, saying, quote, "It started to become, we're either giving two or giving none." He also thought the Navy would have recommended an upgrade for Slabinski even if the Air Force had not tried to do the same for Chapman. Slabinski deserved it, and the review gave the Navy the opportunity to make it happen, he says. When word of the Navy's plan spread through the Special Ops community, some were shocked. A retired Special Ops official intimately familiar with the battle says, quote, "It's just incredulous that they award him with the Medal of Honor. Slab was completely at fault for everything that happened that night." He and others suggested that the Navy's move was a direct reaction to the Air Force's effort on behalf of Chapman. Mike, the former targeting analyst, says, quote, "They can't stop Chapman's package, so now they're trying to save face." Even members of Slabinski's own service were taken aback. Up to this point, the Navy's Talker Gar narrative had been, Slab got a Navy Cross for his valor that night. He didn't leave anybody behind. The Navy officer, familiar with the awards controversy, says it was never what Slab did was worthy of the Medal of Honor. Outgoing Navy Secretary Ray Mabus, the last stop in the Navy's approval chain for the upgrade, did not return phone calls seeking comment for this story. Thomas Opel, who served as his chief of staff, says that while he and Mabus were aware of, quote, opinions about this that differed on whether Slabinski was deserving of this award, end quote, it was not a major topic of discussion with Mabus, who approved the upgrade and forwarded it to Carter's office. The Air Force decided not to oppose Slabinski's Medal of Honor recommendation. James says the Air Force has never said a negative word about Slabinski. Everybody believes he did his best. Nonetheless, the Navy's move created a conundrum for the Pentagon. As the former combat controller puts it, how can one man earn a Medal of Honor saving everyone else's life, and the second guy, whose life was saved by the first, as he acknowledges in his witness statement, and who then makes the decision to leave the first guy for dead, also earn the nation's highest medal? The answer, according to a former defense official, was that just like Slabinski's Navy Cross, the upgrade would cover not just the firefight on the peak, but also his bravery in leading his team back to Takur Ghar to try to rescue Roberts, and then in shepherding the survivors down the mountain to safety. It was the totality of Slabinski's actions that persuaded Chief of Naval Operations Admiral John Richardson that he was worthy of the Medal of Honor. The former defense official says, given the harrowing situation he found himself in, his being able to lead the rest of his team to safety after losing 2 to enemy fire and having 2 more grievously wounded went above and beyond the call of duty. But perhaps sensitive to the argument articulated by the former combat controller, the SEALs continued to object to the Air Force's insistence that Chapman had survived beyond their departure. As a former senior Air Force official puts it, they were still really putting up roadblocks. You'll throw him under the bus. Up to mid-2016, the SEALs seemed to have portrayed Chapman's actions before they allegedly left him for dead as heroic. But by that fall, they had started to change their stance in their efforts to resist the Air Force's attempt to upgrade the Airman's Award. In this new version of events, Chapman's actions in the moments after the helicopter landed were the result of him disobeying Slabinski's order to immediately find cover and contact the gunship overhead so it could fire in support of the team. Basically, they were on the cusp of getting in, and he just took off running, guns blazing, totally off book, off script, glory-seeking, whatever, says the Navy officer familiar with the controversy. That was the way it was conveyed to me. A JSOC memo obtained by Newsweek regarding Chapman's potential upgrade includes a note appended by a Team 6 representative on September 21st, 2016, that articulates this line of argument. Quote, the actions were inconsistent with the orders given to Chapman. He neglected his primary responsibility of establishing comms with air support, which, had he consolidated initially with the team and established comms, would have enabled positive identification of the team, their location, and allowed for close air support fires, which could have saved Chapman and prevented the wounding of the other 2 team members. This new tack incensed Chapman supporters, who saw it as a desperate attempt to derail his award. That became their position when nothing else was working, says the former combat controller. From the Air Force side of the equation, our disappointment at that point is absolute, because it's like, you guys, in order to protect your image, will sully the legacy of a man who you all agreed saved everyone's life 15 years ago. But now, to protect the SEAL brand, you'll throw him under the bus. The SEAL's alleged attempt to change the narrative about Chapman's initial actions also failed to persuade senior Pentagon officials who would ultimately decide whether to forward the recommendation to the White House. As one puts it, quote, there were some people who said, hey, he wasn't supposed to go to the left. He was supposed to go to the right. To which we all said, the damn enemy was to the left. He went towards the sound of guns, so shut up. End quote. A Mako 30 SEAL says that he does not recall anyone accusing Chapman of failing to obey orders, and that as far as he knew, the SEALs didn't have any issues with recognizing him for his heroism up until the point Chapman was shot. But, he adds, the airman's alleged actions after that point were what the Air Force was using to get him the upgrade. That rankled Chapman's Mako 30 teammates, who remain unconvinced by the Air Force's argument that their colleagues survived after they retreated. The Mako 30 SEAL says the way they pieced it together, it didn't add up. Defense Secretary Mattis directed his deputy, retired Marine Colonel Bob Work, and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine General Joseph Dunford, to evaluate the merits of both nominations. They convened a series of contentious, high-level meetings in the Pentagon. The unique nature of the Chapman case was the principal factor that once again delayed the process, according to a former defense official familiar with the discussions. Senior Pentagon officials were concerned that there were no eyewitness accounts of Chapman's heroism. One constant in the discussions: the institutional allegiances of the different special operations tribes and the direct connections of several key leaders to the Takur Ghar fight. In addition to Thomas and Zymanski, Army General Joe Vodal, the head of U.S. Central Command, also had a personal stake in the mountaintop struggle. At the time of the battle, he commanded the 75th Ranger Regiment, which meant he was Thomas's boss. The Rangers who died were his men as well. The Team 6 commander from 2015 to 2017 had also worked for Zymanski at Bagram during Anaconda. As a result, says a former defense official, there were no completely objective observers in this entire thing. A head on a platter. As the two packages worked their way through the system, some military officials expressed concern about several questionable episodes in Slabinski's past. Federal law states that a service member cannot receive the Medal of Honor if his service after he distinguished himself has not been honorable. Slabinski had been associated with at least 3 controversial incidents since Takur Ghar, according to a January 2017 article in The Intercept about alleged Team 6 transgressions. The article included an audio file of a segment of an interview Slabinski conducted with author Malcolm McPherson for his book, Robert's Ridge, which tells the Takur Ghar story from Slabinski's perspective. In the interview, Slabinski recounts a mission in 2002, not long after the Takur Ghar fight, and describes shooting at the corpse of an enemy fighter he knew was dead, just to watch the body jerk as the bullets hit it. A former special operations officer who has heard Slabinski discuss the same incident said it sounded to him as if it could be construed as a war crime. The other 2 episodes occurred during a 2007-2008 deployment to Afghanistan. In one, Slabinski told his men before a mission that he wanted, quote, a head on a platter, according to The Intercept. Slabinski and others later said he was speaking metaphorically, but one of his men appeared to try to saw off a dead militant's head. Slabinski later told the New York Times he ordered the operator to stop what he was doing. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service looked into it, but closed the case after finding no evidence the SEALs had broken the laws of armed conflict. Shortly thereafter, Slabinski's squadron was involved in another contentious incident when local elders accused the SEALs of killing every man they saw during a mission. A former senior Team 6 member told the New York Times that Slabinski, the squadron's senior enlisted man, had directed the operators to kill every adult male they encountered on the raid. Slabinski denied giving any such guidance, and a JSOC investigation found no wrongdoing. The allegations in the Intercept article were looked into by Naval Special Warfare Command when that article was published, a Navy official tells Newsweek. No allegations of misconduct were ever found to be credible. Although the Intercept article covered all 3 episodes, only the 2002 incident was raised to the attention of the Pentagon officials considering whether to forward Slabinski's Medal of Honor recommendation to the White House. As one puts it, we were aware of the audio file where Slab admitted to shooting a corpse. However, We were told he had not been subject to any disciplinary action. After careful consideration, it was decided that it was not something that should prevent Slabinski receiving the nation's highest award for valor. Nonetheless, the officials flagged the matter when they sent the recommendation forward. Quote, "We wanted to make sure that those who would make the final decision were aware of the incident," a former defense official says. However, a former senior Team 6 officer says a Medal of Honor for his actions during the Takur Gar fight would force Slabinski to repeatedly relive an extraordinary traumatic episode he has tried to put behind him. In 2016, Slabinski told the New York Times that he had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and still saw visions of figures moving in slow motion on Takur Gar. Says the former senior Team 6 officer, "I don't think he really wanted this thing." Yet Slabinski has reluctantly accepted that it's his duty to accept the award if the president signs off on it. He adds, he's going to be the quiet professional and represent it the best he can. The heroism of both men. By July, Dunford and Work recommended that the awards for both Slabinski and Chapman be upgraded to Medals of Honor. Mattis forwarded both packages to the White House in the fall. If Trump approves the awards, it will mark only the third time in the post-9/11 era that 2 Medals of Honor have been awarded for actions during the same battle, says awards expert Sterner, an Army veteran with 2 combat tours in Vietnam. Despite the efforts of the SEALs and U.S. Special Operations Command, when Chapman's award citation went to the White House, it included a reference to his lonely fight after the Mako 30 survivors had retreated. Work ultimately reinserted that language, James says. However, another source tells Newsweek that much of the detail pertaining to Chapman's actions during that period will be classified because of the technical intelligence that was involved. This news, already known to some insiders, fed perceptions that the Pentagon was trying to protect the SEALs' reputation. It's part of accommodating SEAL Team 6, says the former combat controller. It allows them to sort of obfuscate things. Chapman's sister, Lori Longfritz, says her priority is seeing her brother recognized for his heroism, not the politics that has surrounded the effort to upgrade his award. She tells Newsweek, "I just want John to get what he deserved to be awarded back in January of 2003. What happens outside of that, I don't care." Spokesmen for U.S. Special Operations Command and U.S. Central Command were mum about whether their bosses had concurred with the upgrades for Chapman and Slabinski. However, a defense official says U.S. Special Operations Command did not concur with the Slabinski upgrade, but did for Chapman's, only on the basis of his actions before the SEALs withdrew. There was a late effort to persuade Mattis not to approve Slabinski's upgrade, according to a senior Pentagon official. There's some unease about the Navy's push to upgrade, and some people have expressed doubt as to whether it's truly worthy of a Medal of Honor, the official says. A couple of people have tried to slow it down, but the train seems to have left the station, unless the White House decides otherwise. Historically, once a Medal of Honor package reaches the White House, it is virtually assured of approval, says Sterner. However, the Trump administration has yet to make an announcement regarding either package. Defense Department policy is not to comment on the status of pending Medal of Honor nominations until the award is announced by the White House or the medal is awarded by the president, says Eastburn, the Pentagon spokesman. Says a former defense official, the reputational aspect of all of this may be why the White House is taking so long to approve the awards. In other words, the Trump administration may be preparing for blowback. When you're asking the president to award the Medal of Honor, you want to make sure that he understands, look, this will be viewed as controversial by some people and may play out in the press in ways that detract from the heroism of both men, the former official says. Any debate over the validity of the awards would be unfair to the men being recognized, says Sterner. There should be no controversy here, he says. Awarding both of these men the Medal of Honor does nothing to take away from the prestige of the award and everything to highlight the true heroism of 2 very, very dedicated servicemen. Senior Pentagon officials ultimately reached the same conclusion. Says the former defense official, quote, "I'm sorry it took so long and there was such a contentious debate. But I'm satisfied in the end the right decision was made. Both Slab and Chappie were courageous warriors who rated a Medal of Honor. This by no means guarantees unanimous opinion among officials who have watched the process play out over the past 2 years. Says the Navy officer familiar with the controversy, the soil is pretty freaking soggy for us to really stand firm on any of these. Meanwhile, he adds, the Pentagon is trying to silence the naysayers. Mattis's office has made it pretty clear that if and when this thing moves, we don't want to hear any dissenting voices or side chatter. That may be a vain hope. I know how bad this story can be, the officer says of the potential fallout, which makes him wonder, why are we even walking into this buzzsaw? Sean D. Naylor is the author of Not a Good Day to Die, The Secret History of Operation Anaconda, and he's a national security correspondent for Yahoo News, and he wrote every word you've heard me read over the past couple of weeks. You can read the article in its entirety by visiting our Facebook page, facebook.com/FeltRecoilShow.